the one issue that continues to linger, and we got some, I don't know that I want to call it good news. It was kind of confusing news last week. Pete Carroll, the Seahawks coach, said Thursday that a team had called him about the visit that the Seahawks had with Colin Kaepernick back in 2017, and it's the first time Pete Carroll had heard from anyone else in the league about the visit they had with Colin Kaepernick, which creates the impression that someone may be interested in Colin Kaepernick. Drew Rosenhaus had some comments to NBC News over the weekend, and one very important point that caused me to go back to the original comments from Colin Kaepernick and dust them off. And what Rosenhaus said is that Kaepernick was really ahead of his time with a lot of the things he was saying. If you play many of his interviews from years ago, they're spot on today. And, Chris, it really is amazing. I want to read to you one of the first things Colin Kaepernick had to say about this in August of 2016. There is police brutality. People of color have been targeted by police, so that's a large part of it. And they're government officials. They're put in a place by the government, so that's something that this country has to change. There's things we can do to hold them more accountable and make those standards higher. You have people that practice law, and our lawyers go to law school for 8 years. But you can become a cop in 6 months and don't have to have the same amount of training as a cosmetologist. That's insane. Someone that's holding a curling iron has more education and more training than people that have a gun and are going out on the street to protect us. And I looked it up at the time. In California, 888 hours was what you needed to get your police certification. 1,600 hours is what you needed to hold a curling iron. So he was right. He was right. And when you see what happened Friday night, and it's difficult video to watch, when you see what happened to Rayshard Brooks in the Wendy's parking lot, it becomes abundantly clear that there are people out there who have the ability, the license, the authority to use deadly force and don't know how in the hell to use it, and don't know when to use it, and don't know when they shouldn't use it, and don't know how to restrain themselves when they get punched in the face and the guy takes off with their stun gun and they've got their emotions and adrenaline going. They don't know how to refrain from resorting to the lethal force that they have attached to their hip, Chris. So there does need to be better training. There does need to be higher standards. He was right all along. And that's kind of where we are right now. We're seeing and saying, this guy was right all along.
Well, I mean, if this weekend doesn't prove that it's a real issue, then I mean, of course we knew it was, but I mean, this weekend just accentuates it, Mike. I mean, with all that's going on in the world, you know, a cop is going to pull his gun on a guy who he's already got all the information of. Yes, he's got your stun gun, but as we know, that is not a deadly tool. But we're going to shoot him like he's running away with the keys to the United States or something? I don't understand that. And that just tells you that there is issues here. I mean, in the current climate where you can't turn on a news channel right now and they're not talking about police brutality and the injustices of the African-American society. And yet there we were on a Friday night with a white cop and an African-American, you know, being arrested. He runs and you shoot him? I mean, because he's got a taser? I mean, can't we just call other cops and go chase him and maybe just get him that way? I mean, when was it like, now this is wild game and we just shoot people? Like, oh, he's running. I mean, it's just insane. So it just accentuates the problem and strengthens the case of the reality of what's going on here in this country. And that's what's infuriating, is some people don't want to see it. Some people are still making excuses for Friday night. It's just unbelievable. But we just got to keep knocking at the door and educating people, and hopefully we can turn most people around.
I saw an interview over the weekend with someone from the police union who is going to say all of the perfunctory things that this was justified, and it was nonsensical what the guy was trying to say to justify this. Someone on MSNBC Friday night said it's not like this guy was going to have a helicopter emerge out of nowhere and take him off to Kathmandu. This isn't a serial killer who was moving on to his next victim. It was a guy who was asleep in his car. He was drunk. He broke the law. He was going to face the consequences for it. And then he was going to face enhanced consequences for resisting arrest with violence. That's a felony in most jurisdictions. That's a problem. He was in trouble. But that doesn't justify the police officer in that moment acting as judge, jury, and executioner with no chance for the governor to call and give a reprieve. That's what we're talking about, folks. These people are walking around in our communities with guns, and they have the license to use those guns whenever they decide that it's appropriate. And yes, there are consequences when you use it incorrectly, but you know what? Whatever consequence that cop faces is nothing like the consequence that Rayshard Brooks faced. He didn't deserve to die. He deserved to be in trouble. He didn't deserve to die. And the people who are issued the guns and the ability to use those guns in the line of duty need to be held to a higher standard. That is not anti-cop. If I was a cop, I'd like to think I'd be very conscientious about use of force. I'd like to think that I was committed to doing the right thing at all times. And I'd like to think I'd be damn pissed off if there were other people out there in my community, in my state, in my country that made me look bad, that I have to deal with their crap because they don't know when to keep the gun in the holster, when to pull it out, and when to pull the trigger. I would be so pissed about that if I was a cop, and I would say any good cop out there should be upset about it. We hear that excuse, oh, well, there's just a few bad apples. Well, it looks like there's more than a few, first of all, but all the good apples need to stand up and find the bad apples and throw them the hell out of the bushel.
Yeah, well, you're right. That's a good point. You know, I can speak just as an NFL player. When we had a few bad apples, right? Bad apples, you know, guys in the locker room, guys in the league, you get pissed
Chris
off.
Sims.
Well, yeah, right. When players did dumb and stupid things, though, you felt like, well, yeah, you felt like you've cheated us all. I know you're joking, but yeah, that's what you feel like. You're just like, I mean, gosh, you're giving us all a bad name by what you did, this weekend or getting arrested or whatever it may be. So, and then, yes, within that, you try to correct that guy in the locker room. Like, hey, man, you're better than that. Don't be doing that crap. It looks bad on all of us. It just doesn't seem like that goes on sometimes in the police. It seems like, nope, I know you were wrong, but we're going to support you in your wrongness because we're policemen and we're all together and you're wrong. So I don't know, but we're supporting you. And that makes no sense either. You're right. I'd like to see a little bit more accountability there. And trust me, I am very sensitive to how tough that job is. I understand it. And I'm very thankful for the police department and everything they do. I really do get it. They've helped me many times in my life, family members, whatever it may be. I know there's a lot of good ones, but like you're saying, it just seems like there's a few more than just a few bad apples out there right now, and we need to fix that.
And, the one point I didn't make, as they decided that this man who was drunk and was running away with their taser needed to be shot and killed, there was a line of cars in the drive-thru at the Wendy's. You get a stray bullet, you get a bystander killed. Is that really the kind of serious, immediate risk that justifies the Wild West approach and bang, bang, shoot 'em up? I mean, it really, really is disheartening that it happened post-George Floyd at a time when people are supposed to be understanding these issues and acting accordingly. You just wonder how much of that is getting through to the people who need to be hearing the message. So, look, hey, we're here. We have the platform. It's crossed over to the NFL, and I think it's important to make these points. One last thing on Kaepernick before we take a break. And when I think back to 2017, the paralysis that teams like the Ravens had and other teams that were concerned they were going to lose fans, right? That's why they stayed away. That's why they all stayed away from Kaepernick. It's a business decision. Has anybody stopped to think? Has anybody tapped into the expertise they have in-house to run the numbers on what it would mean to sign this guy? Setting aside right and wrong, setting aside that he should be in the league, setting aside the fact that he's been shunned and blackballed by the NFL. Has anybody bothered to sit down and think about what it would mean in this moment to your business? If it was business interest that got you to stay away from him 3 years ago. I mean, first of all, he gets signed by somebody. You got the number one jersey in the NFL right out of the gate.
No doubt.
Right out of the gate.
No doubt.
I don't know how much money teams make off of that. You got the number one jersey. Throughout the country, you have a national following right out of the gates. Whatever team you are, these teams want to do Hard Knocks to get a national following. You're not going to get a national following from Hard Knocks. You may get nationally ridiculed based upon all the dumb stuff that comes through the TV screen. You're going to get a national following if you sign Colin Kaepernick. And you're going to have your brand mentioned. You're going to have fans that are going to want to come to your games. And it's going to I think at this point, I'd like to think there's someone out there who can crunch the numbers for any of the teams that may be interested and come to the conclusion this is a net gain at this point, regardless of what's right or wrong. I think it's shifted to the point, Chris, where it is a good business decision, and I'm just waiting for someone to come to that conclusion.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think you're right. I mean, it's going to be big-time jersey sales. We saw this when Nike gave Colin Kaepernick the contract. I mean, their stock went through the roof. More people gravitated toward it. I think it is the time right now to where, yes, there's enough people woke and aware of the situation and want to see change. And Kaepernick's such a powerful name and such a powerful figure in this movement that will bring people to fandom of the NFL that, simply maybe just, oh, that team won this Sunday. Great. Now they might tune in and watch. You make this type of move and sign a Colin Kaepernick, that makes this type of statement would be huge to, I think, the country. And yeah, you're going to lose a few fans, but I think ultimately you're right, Mike. You'll end up gaining more fans than you lose.
All right, we'll see how that plays out. The other point that I made over the weekend, too, that when you think back to Jackie Robinson and Branch Rickey and how Branch Rickey is remembered by history, and I know this is far different than the Jackie Robinson situation, but there are similarities. This is a player who by some is reviled, who by some they believe he should not be in the NFL, and they'll huff and puff and threaten to blow your house down if he's on your team. And just from the standpoint of how people want to be remembered on the back end of this time in history, I'd like to think there's some coach, general manager, or owner out there that would love to seize the opportunity to be remembered in such a positive light as the person who stood up and said, I'm going to do the right thing here, and I'm bringing Colin Kaepernick back to the NFL. We'll see if that happens.